I have a book out with Abhishek Mukherjee, and it is called Overthrowing Cricket's Empire. And it's about the stories of how each team beat England for the first time. We go all the way back to the demon Fred Spofforth getting annoyed at W.G. Grace for acting a little bit like Alex Carey. And then we come all the way to present times with Rashid Khan's England's redemption. We cover every single team to beat England in a major international, but we also talk about the incredible stories, like the barefoot basher from Fiji that almost played for New Zealand. In fact, this book is full of tales like that, like how Pakistan lost a top batter after he was on the run from an angry husband of a movie star he was having an affair with, and also how one future captain of his nation realised he might have to go out and bat at Lords and that he didn't own his own pads. Cricket was used as a tool by the Empire, but what happens when those nations grow up and get good at it? Find Overthrowing Cricket's Empire on Amazon today. All right, welcome to Wagon Wheel. I'm Jarrod Kimber. This is the Cricket Podcast where we answer your questions on the sport. The best way to do it is either via Patreon, which is Patreon/Good Areas Podcast, and you can line them up there once you sign up as a member, or you can do it live on the YouTube via Super Chats as we go today, right now, like now. If you were pressing a button, unless this is not live for you, then no, don't press a button now. But let's start with a few of the questions, like from Patreon with Ali, who says, thoughts on Nigerian and Egyptian cricket infrastructure? Why wasn't cricket able to capture an audience there, even though they were both former English colonies? I don't know much about either of them, to be honest, as far as, I know a lot more about Kenya, I suppose. And I know that Kenya had real problems with their infrastructure because it wasn't that they didn't have good cricketers in Kenya. It's that they had half of their good cricketers were in Mombasa and the other ones were in Nairobi. And there wasn't a particularly easy way for them to train. And, it just didn't work the way that they ever really wanted it to. So there are issues within that, I suppose, that, perhaps Egyptian cricket and Nigerian cricket might have had before. Why wasn't cricket able to capture an audience there, even though they were both former English colonies? So there's a lot of English colonies that don't play cricket, right? So I think that's one thing that we need to remember. If you go to, I've been doing this recently, but Italy, obviously we just did a piece on Italy. Like cricket was quite big in Italy, and then World War I happens, and then World War II happens. And so you have a situation there where it's hard to play cricket in that period. Cricket probably hadn't quite taken full effect. Then Italy is against England in the war, and so you move there. World War II actually killed quite a few good, what we would now call associate level teams. So Italy, Argentina is another one, and then you have. And if you look at war, and I might be doing this as a larger piece one day because it's quite interesting, the amount of countries that played cricket and then during war years, if they had an extended period of war, stopped playing cricket. So I'm not saying that Nigeria in Egypt had that, but not every colony picks it up. And then afterwards, you don't have a situation where it specifically grows in every country. Like, football went to a lot of different countries and cricket went to a lot of different countries and rugby went to a lot of different countries, right? But when you go back on it and you have a look, there isn't specifically that many, rugby countries out there. Why in Argentina did rugby survive and cricket didn't? Right. And I don't know if there's a great answer for that. But yeah, the Nigerian Egyptian one, they're not my, I haven't seen the highlights yet. I've got to go look at the MV play of the Nigerian game. MF Jim says, Alex Hartley has been given the cold shoulder by her English women's team after her comments about the team's fitness. Surely professional athletes get hard feedback often, and these comments would be water off a duck's back. Have you had any disputes with teams, boards, or broadcasters that seem confusing or are willing to share? So I've got a lot of thoughts on this. The first thing I would say is, if you're the person who does the end of play interviews, you can't also be the person with the big opinions. And I say this as someone who's been asked to do those two jobs. A player's not going to want to come and speak to me if I've just written a 2,000-word piece on why they should not be in the side or the flaws within their game or whatever it may be. They're just not. It's a different job. And so most players will come over and they'll do the interview maybe sheepishly, or maybe they won't give you much in the interview or whatever. But I think you're asking a lot of the players to suddenly think that they're going to be happy with, especially with Alex's comments, right? specifically talking about their physical conditioning, players are going to take that personally, and it's going to be hard for her to do the other part of her job. Now, Alex hasn't been in the media as long as I have, and she might have thought, well, it's my job to speak truth to power. I'm a journalist, but those kinds of people are usually very, very different than these kinds of people. So it's why a lot of players won't do interviews with me, right? Like I have a history. There's a particular player who weirdly I've said a lot of nice things about, like a retired player of recent times, but I was hard on them during their career. I would say it was justifiable, and I would be happily bring them on to have a podcast about it if they wanted to, do that. But they don't want to have anything to do with me because of what I said about them during their career. They're okay. That's okay. That's fine. I'm going to add some other things though here to this, which I think is quite interesting. You say surely professional athletes get hard feedback. Women cricketers don't get a lot of hard feedback. I remember writing about the Australian women's team early on, 2012, I want to say. And I wrote about them as if they were a men's team. They were furious with what I was writing. And at the time, I couldn't get it because I always kind of thought about it the way that you did, Emma. I was like, wait, what? You're an international team, and I'm writing about you like an international team. But they were furious because they hadn't been written about that way. They hadn't been critiqued in that particular way before. I don't think it soiled any relationships. I don't think I actually had great relationships with them. With that team, I'd have to go back and have a look, but I don't think so. To have an issue with, and they answered all my questions at press conferences, and they knew who I was. There was some animosity, even a couple of years later, from some people I'd heard, but I don't think it affected me. It happens. Weirdly enough, some of the players I was probably, I don't know if in some cases too harsh on or overly critical of, or maybe even, just went too far with at times. Steve Harmison, Marcus North, Brad Hogg. I went on to have very good relationships with them because we worked together years later, right? And so you end up in a situation where it's all normal and fine. And sometimes it's a lot easier. I've had players who, I think, I don't want to name this player, but there was an English player who didn't like what I did quite a bit, and then retired. And we did some stuff where I wouldn't say we were working together, but we were on projects around each other, and we have a lot of friends in common. And that person always says hi to me now and smiles. They might still have an issue. That's fine, but I know that for a little while they definitely didn't. Had an issue with that. I think isn't that just part of working in a professional environment? I'm a bit surprised Alex Hartley went public with this, only because once you make that comment, like it's now all about her. And when I'm in the media, and I've been involved in things like this before, you kind of take yourself out of it a little bit and go, okay, well, they're upset with that. They're fine to be upset with that. And then you tell your bosses, and if your bosses want to make a big deal of it, or other broadcasters who you work with want to make a big deal of it, I think you probably go, well, that's fair enough. But yeah, as far as boards, my biggest problems have always been with boards. It's not been with players. It's certainly not been with broadcasters. There are some broadcasters. There was obviously a major broadcast producer who, having a beef with him has probably affected my career a little bit. I think that's probably fair to say. I think I would have had a much bigger career in Australia if that was the case, if I didn't have that. But most of my problems have been with boards. I've had problems with Cricket Australia's probably been the main one. ECB, a little bit with Sri Lanka cricket, although I don't think it's really affected anything. The Netherlands, I had an issue with the Netherlands. I wouldn't even say that was with the board. It was with an individual person. These things exist, and it is up to you as a professional to navigate it. She's a professional as well, right? And Alex has to understand that if she's going to say things, people are going to react to them, right? I don't think the English players are in the wrong here, the same way I don't think Alex is in the wrong. But if you are going to make those comments, they are going to feel a certain way about them, and it's going to affect how you do the rest of your job. Most people who interview athletes ask them how they feel. How was it out there? You look tired. Oh, that was a tough one. There's a reason that those are the questions that are asked, right? It's very hard to be a beat writer and to be friends with all the players. I've been listening to Jeff Pearlman's podcast recently. It's such a great podcast. For those of you who don't know Jeff Pearlman, he's a famous sort of long form writer. He wrote the Lakers TV show that had a couple of seasons there. But I've read some of his features over the past, and then through that TV show, kind of found out he's got a podcast. But a lot of his podcast is about the relationships that you have. I think if you're honest and if you're upfront, if the players then say they don't want to talk to you, you kind of have to accept that as part of it. Or you go the other way and you become more of a broadcaster who builds relationships with people and isn't always, stringent. There's plenty of people who make that career as well. Like you have to decide, and it's not easy. And Alex is going through what I've gone through, what hundreds and hundreds of other people have gone through. Thousands of people in the sport industry have gone through before. Being a broadcaster or a writer in sport is partly an access thing. And the one thing that sports athletes and boards can take away from you is your access. She now has to work out how to get around that. It's happened to me before. Telford Vice and was it Telford and Fidos lost their accreditation in South Africa. Bayram's having an issue getting accreditation in Pakistan at the moment. We don't know what the full reason is because no one's answering any phone calls over there. But these are things that happen, and you have to navigate that. And I probably had more than my fair share of it. But if I put that out in the world, I don't usually then follow it up with, I can't believe this player won't talk to me after I said this thing about them. I kind of think that's fair enough. Jane says, thoughts on the new BCCI guidelines for their players. To briefly summarize, ban player traveling separate from the team, disallow families on tours, disallow players' personal staff, mandate domestic cricket. Would any of these four give favorable outcomes? Has cracking the proverbial whip ever given any results in the past with teams? So when India was winning a World Cup, and when they were winning all those games, Jane, with their family and friends around, how did they manage to survive and win games with a wife there? It's nonsense, obviously. And this is, you always see this sort of draconian old men come in and go, well, if they didn't have their wives around, they'd be better. I'm better with my wife around than I am without my wife around. Right? As a general rule, my mental health is better. Most of my issues come up when I'm on my own on tour, right? Most of my darkest psychological issues come up when I'm, I've had a couple of really bad tours in my career. If my wife was there, I wouldn't have been able to have those moments, right? Like, I don't know how I would have handled the entire St. Lucia tour with everything that went on there if my wife wasn't just there, right? And not to mention my kids as well, because they distract you a little bit from the nonsense. But my wife was the big reason that, I was kept sane and handled everything there. So, yeah, for me, it's just nonsense, the family thing. The entourage thing of traveling with 12 players, 12 support staff. I think it's fair for the BCCI to be like, look, you can bring 3 or 4 people, but you have to pay for them, obviously, and we will make arrangements to make sure that they travel with us. But, you're in charge of them and everything else. But there has to be a limit, right? I don't think you can travel with 12 people. If your agent wants to come, like a lot of agents will travel with players, they can get their own hotel room. They don't have to be involved with it. So I don't see why all these other people have to. But a couple of people make sense. I know players who've traveled with their own physiotherapist, their own mental health person, their own dietitian, and people like that. I think that's okay. So again, if you have those people at home, why are you suddenly saying they can't go on the road? And the last one is the domestic cricket. There is a certain... Again, a lot of these players were really successful without playing a lot of domestic cricket. And a lot of players from other countries in the world have been really successful without playing a lot of domestic cricket. I think if you're Rohit or Virat, I think at a certain point, you do have to think about a little bit about just how you handle these things. And as in, if you're not informed and something's going wrong, don't you have to go play domestic cricket yourself? And shouldn't they know what's best for them more? The idea that Indian cricketers are going to go back to domestic cricket and that's why they lost their last series is ridiculous. So, yeah, I reckon almost every team in the world over a cricket team over a certain period after a couple of lost games has made a bunch of these kinds of comments. And when the team's playing well, the families are there, the staff is there, they're not playing domestic cricket. So what does that tell you? It tells you that this is just an overreaction and a bit silly. Let's have a quick break. And then after break, more of the Wagon Wheel. Cricket media used to be pretty simple. Find your favorite newspaper, head to Cricinfo, and maybe a blog you like. Now just finding the best stories and writing is a huge challenge. You already have a job. You just want to read about cricket. Well, that is what the best of cricket is currently doing. They go out daily to find the newest cricket coverage and the best stories from any publication in the world. And when they can't discover what they want, they also hire some of the best writers to produce their own great stories. You can get the best of cricket via their website or on WhatsApp. They find cricket's best stories and give them to you every day. All right, Nicholas says, in the season when Cam Green made his Shield debut, he batted 9 for Western Australia, 8 in the second 11, and 6 and 7 in first grade cricket. Below Nathan Coulton-Idle and even Jason Behrendorff. And then 6 at the under-19 championships. The season before, he was batting below Jai Richardson for under-19. He doesn't cross 50 in his first 8 Shield games. By 2019, he starts... yeah, okay, so we get it. He now boasts a better Shield average than Border, War, and everyone else. How does something like this happen? I know sometimes bowlers develop really late in their adolescence, but I can't recall it ever happening with a batter like this. Azhar Ali would be one off the top of my head. Mark Richardson would certainly be another one. You've got a lot of... I think it happens more than you've noticed, Nicholas. I think there's quite a few players who have done that. My knowledge of Cam Green was that there was batting talent. Like, as in there was technical talent, but he wasn't really making any runs, and people didn't know if he was a Stuart Broad, Morne Morkel type player or anything else. So I think it could be something like that as well. I'd have to, I mean, I take you for all your records here as being correct. But no, it's not something that I've never heard before. I think, Nicholas, I could be wrong. I reckon David Boone played underage cricket as a bowler as well. So this is something that occasionally happens. But where it happens the most, Nicholas, is all-rounders. You know, Imran Khan, by the time he hits his 30s, is a specialist batter. Ravi Jadeja showed a lot of lower-level first-class batting talent when he was coming through, but it took a long time for that to develop to international. Daniel Vettori is a bowler when he starts his career and is probably almost a batting all-rounder by the time he ends his career. It's because all-rounders spend a lot of time doing their other skill that they quite often develop at a different pace to everyone else. Jim says, what are some of your favorite and least favorite white ball kits? So we went through them on a couple of podcasts, on a couple of Crick Picks, Jim. Big fan of the old, oh my God, the Stallions, Jaffna Stallions. Big fan of Canterbury Kings. I think someone in our Patreon or our Discord has was showing me that there was a secondhand shop with a bunch of them, and I'm willing to swap a signed book for a Canterbury Kings shirt. I'm not sure if they got one in the end. I can't remember if I followed up on that. But yeah, big fan of those two off the top of my head. I love some of the late 90s Pakistan shirts. Like I really like that color of green. I'm trying to think what else I have. I just bought a Gujarat. No. Did I buy a Gujarat shirt? Yeah, I bought a Gujarat shirt. I just realized I haven't brought it into it's not in my rotation yet. That I really, I like the early Gujarat Titans shirts. I like a lot of the Royals kits, like as in around the world. I think the Barbados one is the one that looks the best, but I like those. I love some of the old fashioned ones too. Some of the old, I've got a collection of about 3 or 4 of some of the older county ones. And the Bushrangers one, and there was a whole load of the old Australian ones that I really liked. So yeah, off the top of my head, those are the ones. Trying to think if there's anything else I have. Yeah, I can't think if there's anything else I wear, but there could be. I've actually got hundreds of shirts, but I got them all when I was quite overweight, and I'm no longer overweight, and so they don't fit me particularly well. So I'm having to slowly build my stuff back up. But I've got one of my favorites is a minor league Seattle shirt. I can't remember the name of the team. Ali says, can you talk a bit about how weather affects pitches and how curators design spin versus bouncy versus flat pitches? Is it science or voodoo magic that no one really knows exactly how to dial the knobs? No, everyone knows how to change things, Ali, but some pitches, like grass, doesn't care about you knowing how to do it, right? Like people get awards for horticulture because it's hard to get a tomato to a certain size and all those sorts of things. Like these are hard things to do. And they're not always automatic. And so, that's the case. Basically, harder wickets usually bounce more as a general rule, but that's not always the case, right? Like that, it's not, there has to be something else within the surface to help for that. It's very hard to make a pitch that doesn't have bounce. That's what I've been told. Flat pitches, generally, you just shave all the grass off and roll as much as possible. Right, so that one's fairly simple. For spin, you want it to dry out a little bit more. So you don't want there to be much moisture in the surface. Again, you want to take all the grass off. But you might want to really, really cut back the grass. But it's very hard to change what a pitch's natural characteristics are. And that's the issue that a lot of cricket boards and cricket teams have had trouble with in the past. Jane says, possibly a silly question. Let's do it anyway. Why do wicket keepers always stick to one end during run-out attempts? If the batter hits the ball down the ground, a run-out should be more likely at the non-striker's end. Does it not make more sense for the wicket-keeper to run down to the other end and attempt gathering the throw rather than leaving? Okay. There's no rules preventing this, Jane. If you're up at the stumps, I get your point, but the vast majority of times when there's a real run-out chance, it's in the sort of situations you're talking about. It's probably towards the death overs of limited overs games. The wicketkeeper's probably back, so you're now talking about the wicketkeeper maybe running 30 meters, 35 meters. I don't know, depending on how far back they are. I'm not sure how practical that is. It's also exhausting them. I have seen it. And I've certainly seen it, not very much, but I've seen it in club cricket, and I've heard it talked about in club cricket. I suppose what we would say, what bowlers would say is like that's their job anyway, and someone else then has to run up and do the wicketkeeper's job. But yeah, I think it's possible. I would only think it's I think this is something that maybe should have happened earlier in cricket before so many players got good arms and could throw to the striker's end. But back in the olden days where you only really ever threw to the bowler's end unless you were like a Tom Moody type thrower of the ball, especially when the grounds were bigger, it probably made more sense. Whereas now I wonder if that's the right way of doing it. But yeah, there's no doubt. It almost makes more sense if you think about it. And I remember a conversation a teammate had with me about this once when he was saying the same thing. This is years ago, like in the 90s. And he said, if you think about it, for long on and long off, when you're stealing a two, the throw comes in so hard to the bowler's end, and it doesn't come in as hard to the wicketkeeper's end because it takes an extra 20 meters, whatever it is. And it's usually bounced by the time it's got to the wicketkeeper. And so the really hard throws at the bowler's end, and that's the person without the gloves on. So I think it's something that we might see in the future. But yeah, I can't, other than tiring out the wicketkeeper, because it's quite a long run, I'm not sure there's many other downsides to it. Jamon Lee, I'm assuming this is the Lee Jamon. Says, pure talent performance-wise, how do you rate Chris Cairns? I genuinely believed he was one of the best all-rounders of his era. Do you think he could have been more valuable in T20? Yeah, I think he would have been fantastic in T20. No, I'm a huge fan of Chris Cairns. I think, just have a look at it, what his overall numbers were in the end. But he was, he's one of my favorite cricketers. Just a brilliant striker of the ball. He averages 33 with the bat, and what, 28 with the ball, 29 with the ball. So genuine number 7 with striking ability too. So, if you had a wicket keeper who could have batted at 6, if they had BJ Watling or McCullum in those days, he would have been much better. He probably, some of his impact is slightly lost, I would say, by the fact, I'm just looking it up now, that Perore, who would have been his wicketkeeper for most of his career, averages 26. So that probably means that he's not quite as transformative. So in order for them to get the extra bowler in, let me just look where he batted. Yeah, so he batted at number 6 15 times, right? And he batted at number 7 31 times. You probably want him to bat at number 7. Geez, he's got a good record at number 7. He averaged 44 there. But you probably want him to bat at number 7 and be your 5th bowler, and then have another top line bowler. And then have your wicketkeeper be able to bat a little bit better. Or if he'd played with like late Vittori and they could have been 6th, 7th together, I think that would have been a better situation. You would have got more out of him. So he's probably, in not being able to average 36, 37, 38 with the bat, which I think you take at number 6 all the time, and then he would have just been the number 6. They would have got more out of him, but like, he was a fantastic player. There's no doubt about that. Ian says, this test has gone to the end. The test has gone to the end of the women's Ashes. If it turns out to be effectively a dead rubber, it has now. Ian, since you've said that, is that an opportunity missed to further the cause for more women's red ball cricket? No, I don't think we have to worry about every issue like that in women's cricket the way that maybe we once did. Don't get me wrong. A women's test that is live is like, I wasn't going to watch many of the, I watched the T20s. I wasn't going to watch much of the one-dayers, but I thought I'd watch the T20s and I'd watch the tests. And I'm already, like, I've lost a bit of my sting, right? So I think that's fair to say. But, yeah, there's no perfect way, because the test is so heavily weighted that if you have the test at the front, it really makes it hard for the team at the end to come back. So no matter how you do it, Ian, it kind of doesn't quite work. Maybe the best way to do it would be like the old days where you would mix the one days and the tests up. So you have a test at the front and you have a test at the end, and the limited overs in the middle is probably the ideal pattern for that, if we're being honest. I remember looking up this series. I don't know when the last time it happened in Australia, but I remember looking up a series where Australia was playing the West Indies, and then they just stopped midway through the test series to play a whole bunch of one days. It's wild. Katakaya says, in my free time, I was looking at scores of previous World Cup qualifiers. Awesome. I noticed Israel played each and every one for a few years, lost all their games, and just disappeared. Firstly, how did they get to play all those qualifiers despite losing all their games? And secondly, where did they suddenly disappear so much that they do not play as much cricket at the moment? I think there was a period of time where they were thought to be I don't know, where would you, like between the 18th and the 25th best side in the world, Qatar. And so while they didn't win a lot of their games at associate level, I still think there was a thought that there was some cricket worth, that they were still there. Also, I'd have to go back on the qualifications. It might have been a regional thing. I can't even remember the qualifications for those. I've looked into a little bit of the 79 qualification tournaments, which Israel played in. That was the tournament where Sri Lanka refused to play them and almost changed cricket history forever. But yeah, my guess is that there was probably a few teams back in those days who played quite a lot of qualifiers, but weren't particularly good. But maybe it might have been a regional thing. I don't know that much about Israeli cricket. The only thing I know is that for years, and I don't know if ESPN know this, by the way, I might be breaking a news story here, but the person who did it, Robin Abrahams, is no longer with us. What an absolute legend he was for Cricket Info and for cricket. But he used to host the Israeli Cricket Federation, or whatever they were called, their website on the ESPN service, and hide it for like a long time. Like, I'm pretty sure that's right. He certainly had it on the old Cricket Info one, and then he went over. So for a while, Robin was doing that, and it was because he was running it, and it was just easier for him to do it that way. if I remember correctly. I'm pretty sure he told me that story, but I know it's true. But I don't know how far it went into ESPN's. But eventually, I'm assuming someone at ESPN realized that was happening and it disappeared. But it wasn't the only one. To be fair, back originally there was quite a few cricket boards that had a partnership with Cricinfo. But that was the last one, and I think it was still there during the ESPN days. That's all I know about Israeli cricket, is that Sri Lanka didn't play them once and it almost changed the course of history, and that Robin Abrahams was running their website via Cricinfo well after they should have been aligned with each other. And that is why Nasser Hussain decided to bowl first at the Gabba. And this all, of course, reminds me of Hit Wicket, which is a mobile cricket strategy game that is all about making those tough decisions. Who do you want to send in as an opener when the asking rate is climbing? Do you go for the big hitter or the steady accumulator? Me, I like to throw in someone a little bit unorthodox. A bit of a wild card like the general. That keeps the opposition guessing. And what about the bowling attack? Do you unleash your express pace early or hold back for the death overs? I'm always tempted to bring on a mystery spinner in the middle overs. Oh, you've got the wrong question up here, don't I? James says, Greg Blewett got off to a huge start in his test career, including a century on debut, but couldn't maintain it. Ended up as having a good patches of form, but not great test career. What do you think happened? Did you think he got worked out? My memory of Greg Blewett was he struggled when the ball was coming back into him. And eventually that whether it be wrong-uns or in-swing or whatever, that caused a bit of a problem. He would sort of prop on his front foot a little bit and get himself trapped LBW. And then if I could be wrong here, and I don't know Greg at all, and I've never really come across him, that was something that got passed around a little bit. And then he started to get bowled. I'm just trying to see if I can come up with his stats here very, very quickly to see. But he got 46 test matches in an era where I think there was a lot of better batting prospects around, but there probably weren't a lot of better batting prospects in the position that he was trying to bat in, which was number 3, right? Like it's kind of between, was he kind of between Boone and Ponting a little bit when it comes to that? But yeah, I just want to see dismissal summaries, see if I'm even close here with Blewett. Yeah, there's a lot of bold and LBW here. So 30 of his dismissals are bowled in LBW, and 43 are caught. That seems to me like maybe I'm onto something there. But he doesn't go on to have a great first class career either. I'd have to go through it a lot closer to have a look. I just don't think he was I think he looked better than he was, maybe in that sort of James Vince style, in that he was very technically correct and he looked great on the eye, but maybe he wasn't quite as solid in all the other parts of batting that you need to be. Yeah, I still think he was a fantastic player. Weirdly enough, too, he was the player for Australia Ray in that series that kind of changed everything with Australia Ray playing Australia. Crazy. The Two says, Moti lost something in his bowling recently. Have these past few tests just been bad luck? I don't think he's been bowling well for quite some time. I would say since the T20 World Cup, he's struggled. He has bowled occasionally well since then. I wonder if there's an injury or something else. But before that T20 World Cup, I was like, you guys, wait till you see. This is going to change everything. And I don't know. So I don't know. I'd love to chat to him about it, but I don't know what the issue is. MF says, what's the difference between men's and women's cricket from an analyst perspective? For example, Alana King apparently puts more revs on the ball than some men in domestic level, according to Alex Malcolm. Mainly T20 and ODI tests are quite different, but happy if all 3 formats are addressed. Yeah, slower bowlers in general can put more revolutions on the ball. So I'm not massively surprised. Also, remember, she's bowling with a slightly smaller ball. So we do get some situations where the women can really rag it because the ball is slightly smaller, but they still have big hands. We made the ball smaller for the ladies, but not all the ladies have smaller hands, right? Like, it's a bit like, well, they should lower the hoop in women's basketball. And it's like, there are women who can still dunk a basketball in the women's game. So I think there's a few, that is perhaps part of it. But if you are bowling slower, I think you can put more revs on it. I'm pretty sure that's true. It's very hard to put as many revs on it as possible if you're trying to force the pace up. And in women's cricket, you don't have to do that at the moment. From an analyst point of view, the biomechanics are completely different. That's the first thing. I don't know if we know what a good bowling technique is in women's cricket as much as we do in men's cricket. I'm always looking at a woman who is willing to not play textbooked, because a lot of young girls are taught how to play textbook shots and they don't have the ability to clear the front leg, or to slog sweep, or to do all those other shots. So those are little things that I'm looking for. Whereas in a male player, I'm probably not as interested in that. I think left-handers and left-arm seam bowlers are way more important in women's cricket as well, because there just aren't as many. William says, after the last World Cup, there was a lot of talk about the health of the 50-over game. Has anything meaningfully changed since then? No, William. Lots of big discussions at the time, and then they all went back to ignoring it like they were beforehand. As far as I'm aware, nothing meaningful is the important phrase there. Nothing meaningful has changed. It'd be interesting to see what happens with this Champions Trophy. It's going to be in Pakistan. Really good time zone for India as well. India are favourites. If India won the last World Cup and they win the Champions Trophy, that might prolong 50-over cricket for a while. With another 50-over World Cup scheduled in India eventually, right? If they don't, I'm not sure that matters all that much. But the boost, I think, is more important than the plateau. I still think the inevitability train is coming for 50-over cricket. Bloody says, enjoyed your recent video about certain events in the Bangladesh Premier League. On a completely unrelated note, could you provide any thoughts, explanation about the Abu Dhabi T10? How does it make money? Does the state fund it? Empty stadiums, way too many teams, strange team names, but some big name players. I don't know anything about that one. I reckon I was offered a job in it at one stage, though. And yeah, I'm pretty sure I was offered a job in that league. And I was just like, I don't think that one's for me. I don't watch T10 cricket very much. I probably watch some of the women's stuff, the women's one in the Caribbean. It was on at a good time, or I was, there was no other cricket on, or I think I just wanted to know more about the quality of women's cricket in the Caribbean. So I watched a bit of that. That's probably the only T10 tournament I've seen a lot of. I saw some of the Zimbo one. Yeah, but I don't know how the Abu Dhabi T10 makes money. I would assume they've sold their betting rights, and their TV rights can't be very much money. But maybe in India, that's enough. I don't know. I don't know if the state funds it. But empty stadiums, a lot of teams, strange team names, big name players. Yeah. What I would say is, in general, I think the T10 market is way less regulated than the T20 market. And I think Alex Marshall, when he was leaving the ICC, said something very similar. Nadika says, is it ethically problematic to encourage kids to become fast bowlers due to the health risks? When you hear stories of Shoaib Akhtar crawling up the stairs, it makes you wonder if anyone should rationally want that. Well, I take it a step further, Nadika. Is it ethically problematic to encourage kids to be professional athletes? By the end of his career, Matt Pryor couldn't walk at times as well. There are plenty of old batters who have bow-legged knees. I'll say this, and I've probably talked about this before, but Alex Tudor, when some young kid will be like, I want to bowl fast, I want to bowl fast. He's like, okay, be prepared to be sore for the rest of your life. That's what Alex Tudor tells 14, 15, 16-year-old young fast bowlers. That's what you need to be prepared for. I think if you tell the kid that, then it's up to them. My dad has had 3 knee replacements and a hip replacement, and it's all from being a fast bowler. And that's just a club fast bowler. But he literally just wore through his knees. Now, we don't have good knees in our family, but he would bowl like 25, 30 over spells on a Saturday, right? That's a lot of bowling. So I think the most important thing is we be honest, and we say to a young opening batter, you might get hit in the head a lot. You say to an opening bowler, you're going to get hit a lot. We say to a wicketkeeper, your fingers are going to be deformed by the end of your life. People can make their own decisions, but hiding that information from them, I think, would be more of an issue for me. Rudra says, suppose the Ashes have been T20s instead of Tests, but with none of the players changing, How would it have been throughout the eras? Australia have genuinely played more attacking cricket and more with a bat. So you would assume, Rudra, that it would help Australia. There's been some periods where that's not been the case. But, if you want to go back, I think having Clem Hill and Victor Trumper would have been a pretty good combo at that stage. Warwick Armstrong would have been an interesting one. How do you set fields to Bradman? All these sorts of things. I think, Keith Miller as the great all-rounder, I think they have a lot of natural advantages. More wrist spinners as well, Rudra. More left arm seamers, probably throughout history. Definitely throughout history. So there's a lot of things that probably go in Australia's favour. Maybe the English bowlers have been more economical and think about things a little bit more that way. But I would have assumed, I would have assumed that's okay. Would 100 have been a great score in the 50s? Well, I mean, T20 cricket would have developed differently, Rudra, if it had got to the 50s by that point. But yes, the 50s probably would have been the slowest period, as they just are. James says, refinement of my previous question, referencing constants. What is it about attacking openers that makes them best suited to opening rather than positions more traditionally associated with attacking batters? So, in my book, James, I've kind of thrown that if you look at the best strike rates in the history of Test cricket history, openers are overrepresented. Overrepresented is the word I was trying to say there. So I think we actually have somehow in our heads not realized how many attacking opening batters there are. So the fastest strike rates of all time, this is completely off my head, James, but of players in the top 6 or top 7, I think we looked at. I think that's what Crickviz sent me, so we could put Gilchrist in there as well. I think Kapil Dev comes in that. Of the players in that list, it's basically openers and players with a second skill. So, Rishabh Pant, Gilchrist, Kapil Dev, those all-roundery type players. I'm missing a couple of others, but those kinds of players. Afridi might be on the list as well. I can't remember where we cut it off. So, and then openers. So, Sehwag, Hayden, Trumper, Srikanth, a lot of more modern openers as well. So I don't know, James, if I agree with that. But if you want to know why having an attacking opener at the top helps, it's because the ball is really hard and the field is up. So you're going to get the maximum value. So if you can handle the new ball in the way that Gordon Greenidge could or Michael Slater could, it's much better to start with all the fielders up than it is when they're out. MF says, I'd say a cricketer's cricketer is someone who could rack up to a club game and not be out of place, but have played at test level, or someone every cricketer loves, not because of their ability, but because of their personality. I probably see a cricketer's cricketer who sees cricket as their favorite sport. So that sort of the Mike Hussey joke, like someone who actually legitimately loves cricket would probably be the sort of person that I would see as a cricketer. But if you're looking at people who could go to a club game, I'm going Michael Yardy, James Hopes, Rajat Bhatia, Benny Howe, off the top of my head. Gurav says, why does Pat Cummins get the image of soft captain player? I don't remember any other Aussie captains bowling 5 overs of bounces to tailenders when the match was almost in the bag. I guess it's more aggressive than I would break your fucking arm, Michael Clark style. Didn't Cummins actually put Shami out of the 2020 series with the blows to the forearm? Oh, Gora. And it's just, you're right, obviously, with what you're saying here. And it's a normal human thing that you're saying. But that's not how the world works anymore. Right? So in the world that we're in now, if you believe in progressiveness and actually trying to make the world a better place, you are soft. And if you believe that the world is absolutely fine as it is and it's damaged and we should poison the ozone and make sure that poor people don't get a step up because they were born poor because they're born to the wrong parents and that was their fault, then you're a hard person. I don't know how to explain these sorts of things. That's just where we are. Gaurav. But yeah, it's obviously nonsense and was nonsense from the start. It's a bit like going back to what the BCCI do. Old men whine and talk shit about stuff from very rarely from a place of intelligence or thought. It's usually just people listen to them and they say things. That's what it says. Should we have a separate category for batters whose first priority was to dominate and entertain rather than preserve their wicket? For example, Barry and Viv Richards at one pole and Boycott and Gavaskar at the other. I'd imagine that Viv would average more than 50.23 if he had a must-stay-in mentality. Yeah, I don't know if that's true, Satchmo. And that's why I wouldn't look at it that way, because I think you play to your strengths. And I think you play... I think a lot of attacking players attack more because they have weaknesses within their technique. I think that's why I do it. I think that's why I play more attacking shots, because I know that I'm susceptible if I have to bat properly, but I can put so much pressure back on the opposition by I can score pretty much everywhere. So it's very hard to set a field to me. So straight away, that means that the captain's already panicking because I've hit a cover drive. Now I've flicked one through backward square leg. If you go short, I can pull or cut. And so suddenly you've got to spread the field, right? You give me back of a length outside off stump twice. I can cut or I can play back foot cover drive. So now you've got to protect two different boundaries. But I do all that because I know that if a really good bowler bowls 12 balls to me, chances are they're going to get me out. And I think there's a lot of players who probably have that within them. And I think there are a lot of attacking players who attack from a position of they won't be able to get to my flaws if I play this way. So I don't think I agree with you at all. I wonder if there are some attacking players who average more because they attack than if they played conventionally. Bloody says, any old school stadiums which you would like to see get a match again for the novelty? Ignoring cost, practicality. For me, it would be beautiful. Asiri Gira, yeah, I pronounced that incorrectly. I think I've been there though. Stadium in Kandy. I mean, Pisara will probably never get another test match. So I love Pisara in there. I mean, obviously the Rec Ground is probably the most famous one in Antigua. I'm trying to think if there's any others. There's probably some of the old Indian or Pakistani grounds, but I can't think of any off the top of my head. But yeah, the Rec Ground is certainly, and Pisara. Like I still like Test cricket occasionally being played in those kinds of venues. It's probably never going to happen again. Gaurav says, "Do you put any effort into the best batters? Did you put any effort into best batters against pace, seam, and spin? Who would be the best in these departments? I think Lara is considered the best ever against spin, but I also think Sehwag comparable. So Lara doesn't make runs in India, and he told me when I interviewed him that he struggled with the ball being flatter and quicker. I don't know if that means Lara would be the best player against spin ever. He was the best player against Warner Murali. So that certainly bumps him back up. You would have Raul Dravid up there. I think Gavaskar's the best player of spin. So in my book, I didn't really cover seam as much. Lara averaged 86 versus spin. Remember though, when you put up a stat like that, I think Gavaskar averaged 104 against spin, and Gavaskar played a lot more spin in Asian conditions when the spinners were in charge than Lara did. So, for instance, I remember looking up the best players against 90-mile-an-hour bowling, and it was like Bangladeshi batters. And it's because they'd faced it on Bangladeshi pitches. And there's a couple of Pakistani batters up there as well. They didn't look as good when they were facing it in other places. So you have to remember, it's not as simple as just looking at the averages. I think Gavaskar is right up there for me. And I would have Dravid very high as well. Then there are players like Samarawira and Navjot Sidhu, who I think are probably great players against spin as well. Kumar Mahela, Yunus Khan. So I think I've got a lot of players up there. But in the book, I kind of said that Gavaskar was the best. Against pace, high-end pace, for me, it would be Ponting or Richards. I probably went with Richards slightly ahead of Ponting in that. seam bowling, it's one thing I've been looking at with seam bowling is I think it's a little bit harder to work it out than the other two. But against the seaming ball, you're probably looking at, I don't know, sort of the boycott sort of Cook type players. Would be my thought process would be those kinds of players would probably come to the fore. Gordon Greenwich, I probably had really high in that as well. Josh says, in New Zealand, is it possible to gamble on the black? In New Zealand, it is possible to gamble on the Black Clash charity match between retired cricketers and rugby players. Is this a more legitimate competition than the Bangladesh Premier League? Remember, that was written by Josh, everyone. Bonus question, what is it like having to work with a legal team to be safe from libel laws? Good luck to the charity match and everything that they're doing. I would not encourage anyone to bet on the Bangladesh Premier League. Not because I think it's fixed, because whether I think it's fixed or not doesn't matter here. I would encourage you not to bet on it because I don't think the betting markets follow proper patterns. And so you might think you're on the right side of something and end up massively on the wrong side of something. So that would be the first thing I would say about the Bangladesh Premier League. Don't bet on it. Look, it was a hard piece to write. There's no doubt about that. I was saying to someone the other day, I used to work for Disney, and so you take that as a given when you work for Disney, that you have the world's best lawyers behind you, right? A decade at ESPN. And not many of my pieces at ESPN went through legal teams, but a couple were pushed in that direction and had to be, obviously. The funny thing about this is now I'm having to write this piece and I don't have a professional legal team, but I did take it through some lawyers who are willing to go through it for me, and another expert in libel as well. I had to be sure this is my business and we can't be shut down by that. And there are many things that we would love to say, but we also, I really believe that this piece had to be done. So I wanted to write it in a way that it could not be taken down and that we could not be sued, but it still got my point across. And my point was, there are things happening within those markets which do not seem right. And that does not mean that they are fixed, but someone should be searching for explanations to the things that I've put up in that piece. And, me and Bayram have done a big podcast about it, which will be out shortly as well, probably next week. And that's basically what we're saying. I've now put the information out here. It's up to the boards to start doing things about this. They have more data than I have access to. It shouldn't be someone like me putting this together. Adityan says, Murali talks about keeping the seam perpendicular to the batter and not facing the batter, so that the batter sees only the side of the ball and cannot pick the direction and spin from the revs of the seam. However, the modern crop of knuckle Karen ball seamers grip the ball with the seam facing the batter, so that you can see the seam rotating anti-clockwise, rotating anti-clockwise when they bowl the Karen ball. Is it because you can only grip the knuckleball at the seam, or are they trying to get some randomness? So what they're trying to do there, and I could be wrong, but what they are trying to do is get the ball to a position where it can swing or it can seam as well. So the knuckleball doesn't rotate, Adityan. So you don't have to hide it. You can't hide that, right? Whereas, so it's a completely different ball. So there isn't, if you look at a knuckleball, so if a bowler bowls a knuckleball, you're looking at it maybe rotating, I don't know, like a couple of times on the way through. You can see it. It's so slow. You can't see a normal ball rotating because it happens so quickly, pace or spin. And so a knuckleball really doesn't rotate. If you bowl a perfect knuckleball, it shouldn't rotate at all. So the batter's going to pick that up anyway. The problem with the knuckleball is that it doesn't react like a normal ball. So even picking it doesn't always help you. But then what they're trying to do is they're trying to get it to swing or seam as well. I think Benny Howe was kind of at the forefront of that, of realizing that the knuckleball doesn't just have to be a ball that comes out slower and weirder. The knuckleball can be a ball that also does something in the air or off the pitch. And that's what you're seeing there. But yes, in general, spinners try and, in the old days, you would have a perfect seam. And batters would pick the way the ball was, not all batters, but, a lot of batters could pick the way the ball was spinning in the air by that. And now we're in a situation where bowlers mix up the seam, so the batters are never sure. Roger says, in your top 50 batters list, Art of Batting, available for pre-order now. Correct. Excluding Sobers and Callis, assuming they're on the list, are there any other obvious all-rounders who would struggle the most against their own bowling? There are no other all-rounders in my top 50 list unless you count wicket-keeping. So there are 3 wicket-keepers in my list. So there are no other bowling all-rounders. Obviously you've got guys like Sachin and Joe Root. I'm trying to think of someone else, but there must be more in the list, and I've forgotten about them. I'll say Wagon, I suppose. Someone else who could bowl a little bit. But yeah, there are no other all-rounders from that point. So yeah, Callis versus Callis, by the way, would almost be a dead heat because he'd be bowling wider and wider out some, trying to tempt himself, and Callis the batter would just leave it, right? I tell you one thing, Sobers wouldn't be bowling left arm finger spin to Sobers because that's what he hit the 6-6s from. MF Jim says, you've somehow become the dictator for life of the ICC. About time. How would you have the game run El Presidente? Inspired from the Pakistan West Indies podcast. I would make Test cricket a league. I would separate Test cricket, T20 cricket, and ODI so they all had their independent governance separate to the global governance of the game. I would sell everything as a league rather than as bilaterals. I would pay all the players and the officials and the ground crew out of the central pot. That's where I would start. Satchmo says, are we seeing a repeat of the mid-90s where the proliferation of ODIs increased the temptation of match fix, especially in games that were thought to be too obscure to attract scrutiny? Replace ODIs with tournaments, T20 tournaments. On the other hand, why aren't players earning enough these days to resist the temptation? I want to... There was remember the Al Jazeera documentary when that came out? And an Australian cricketer contacted me afterwards and said, what are you making of this? And I was like, they didn't really have evidence all the way through. I thought it was interesting, but, et cetera, et cetera. And he's like, yeah, there's no way Australian cricketers would match fix. They get paid too much money. And I said, I get what you're saying here, man. But don't billionaires steal money? Like, why do we think now that like a cricket player wouldn't be like, I can double my earnings? Oh, I'm not going to do that. Or, I can pay for a holiday house on the coast in cash. Oh, I'm not going to do that. Doesn't everyone take extra money? I find it really weird that we think that like suddenly there would be stop short of that. Players, weren't golfers earning quite a bit of money before Saudi Arabia came jingling some coins their way? Like, so I don't get that. I think I think you can make an argument here, Satchmo, that there are so many leagues where it doesn't matter what the result is, that it would be easier to convince a player to do it because it doesn't matter. I think that's probably fair, and you're probably right to go back to the ODIs. I think that is the case. So yeah, I find it hard to argue against that as a reason, if we're being honest. James says, the 77 run over in New Zealand's Plunket Shield is often not recognised as the highest scoring over in first-class cricket. Correct. Because it is considered to have been contrived. For consistency, should individual performances in matches where the result has been contrived, e.g. the double innings forfeit of South Africa, England in the test, where spot fixing has happened, also not be recognised? So, James, it's still considered a first-class game. It's an individual person or a group. I'm assuming this is the ACS. The ACS is not the official situation. So if you're looking for the highest scoring over in first class cricket, Bert Vance's 77 run over, which we did a video on recently, is still the one. It is still the highest first class. But there are a lot of people who, when they count the records, discount certain things. There's no like official records. The ICC doesn't keep official records as far as I'm aware of anything. So you could discount anything that you want, James, from that point of view, at any time. Adityan says, are there funky fields that you have set in your club cricket games that have really pissed off opposition batters? Yeah. Look, I would do it a lot. I would say they pissed off my dad, who's the coach, more than anyone else. I tell you what, opening and bowling with a spinner in 1993 didn't go down particularly well with him. I we played against this one guy a lot, and I had 3 gully fielders for him, and that really, really upset him. This guy a lot because he was. I think it was his main shot, but also he just didn't get it. That's probably my big one. Has always been that not enough players. You get people who edge it, right? Fine, but there are a lot of people who slash. And captains never do that, and so I'm a big one. I've done it in club cricket in the UK, and like I've moved fielders into the gully before, and had captains be like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "Just trust me." And like that, captains are like so hesitant, but it's like there are certain people who slash, and I think especially in club cricket that happens a lot. So putting in multiple gully fielders is something I've done quite a bit. There was one thing my team was very spin heavy. Some of the teams I captained in junior cricket specifically. And we had a little off spinner, sort of a quicker off spinner, and then myself and another leggy. And if someone's hitting a boundary, you put the fielder all the way back, right? To save the boundary. That's a normal thing you do. And I started doing 3/4. I think it was inspired by something I saw the Australians do against Junior Murray. Again, like, it was so weird. But then my old man would go nuts, and it would really help us because he'd be off the field going nuts. Put him on the boundary. And I'd be like, no, I can't hit it that far. And so then we would get 2 or 3 catches at short, long on in under 16s cricket over and over again, because they're trying to hit the off spinners. Specifically, it was the off spinners we got those wickets with a lot. That's probably, I probably set some funky fields for my bowling, probably less so now that I don't bowl as consistently. But when I was bowling consistently, I would quite often have like that sort of Matthew Hoggard fielder, so the short mid on, just off the pitch, and then a short mid wicket. And if you have 2 good fielders there to a leg spinner, you can bowl really, really straight. And if the batter's not very good off their pads, they're kind of a bit trapped. And so I was never expecting to get a wicket there, but it's more you have those fielders there for LBWs. Is probably something I did. But yeah, the gully is my big one. I just think too often we default to slips, and especially in club cricket, I just don't think that's as good. But I admit, like, putting 3 fielders into the gully is like I've been heckled by opposition players quite a bit for doing that one before. But I've actually had a lot of success doing that, over the years, even just suggesting it. And when it works, everyone thinks you're a genius, and it's like, but that's just where they were hitting the ball. Like, I don't understand why we would just not do that. So things like that, I've probably done quite a bit. Not having all the fielders out all the way to the boundary, and just that thing I was talking about before, but doing that quite a lot of it, just being like, oh no, he's not going to hit it. So having like a close-up fielder, maybe at like short mid wicket, and then pushing the mid on back. I do that a lot in UK club cricket, especially for the spinners, and just because people aren't very good at pushing the ball consistently for ones, especially in English club cricket, off spin. And so you can have like a short cover and a short mid wicket, and you can push your long off or your mid off and your mid off back about another 20 steps. And now it's a big hit to get over the top of that fielder, right? So yeah, just little things like that are probably the stuff I do. All right, we've got a bunch of super chats that we're going to have to run through here, but let me take the shortest of short. I don't even know what our shortest ad is anymore. Let's go with this one. This is brought to you by Cricket 8. They are a new player in the game trying to educate fans on what is really happening in cricket. We have a partnership with them where we host live watch-alongs, do podcasts, and write articles. If you want to know what is really happening with our game, visit cricket8.com. If you make any content, Minvo Pro is the tool for you. Take your long format content and cut it and slice it for social media. This AI-inspired weapon will turn your one piece of work into so many clips. Try Minvo.pro now. Ecount says, all things equal, which cricketing equipment do you think will change the most in the next 10 years? Helmets, I would have thought. Helmets on balls would be the two that I would go with, Ecount. Yeah. I think we have to make helmets safer for concussions. So I think that will change. And balls, I think now that Kookaburra have reinforced the ball with plastic, I think they'll I'm still quite hopeful there'll be like a boom in ball technology in the next 10 years. Hassan says, big debate with Pakistan cricket circles at the moment. We're winning tests with spin, but pace bowling will suffer. The counter is current paces can't take 20 wickets. Yeah, I just think you don't want to make your wickets so one-dimensional that it just becomes spin, because then you don't develop pace, which is, I suppose, what people are saying. You also, if you make it so that the pitches are spinning sideways, you allow for poor spinners to beat you in test matches that they wouldn't otherwise do. I think you want a wicket that spins, but that it's harder to just rip through teams. I think that's probably the future for Pakistan rather than anything else, if they want to win consistently. But at the moment, it's probably just about panic winning, right? Oh, did I go past one? Oh, it's me and Varun. We're both on the controllers today. Rohit says, England seems too uninterested in white ball since 2022. Since 2005, their red and white ball form seems to be inversely proportional. They don't fight for World Test Championship realistically by playing 25 tests. So what are they doing? It's a very fair. Yeah, I think they have, as an organization, really talked about taking one thing seriously and making it work for them. And that has been their thing for a while now. So within that, we've seen them be very good at one format or very good at another format, right? And it probably makes them look a little bit more up and down. But you're right. They're going on and on about how they want to save Test cricket. And then the one thing that is actually working for the rest of the world in Test cricket, they're not interested in. But it'd be very interesting to see how they play this white ball coming up against India, which you can hear us commentate on TalkSport too. Roll says, ABW is the greatest batter of all time across formats. Longevity is probably the only thing that goes against him. Well, it depends on how you look at Viv Richards, I think, because obviously he didn't play in all three formats. I don't think there's anything within his game that would have said that he couldn't have dominated T20 cricket. But yeah, and the same with Sachin, right? Sachin doesn't play really T20 cricket. A peak Sachin would have been a great player in T20 cricket as well. So, I don't know how you, it depends on how you frame these things, Roll. And I think it is a little bit more tricky from that. So I don't think it's as simple as that. Varun, I think there was a couple of questions from Ben. I'm just retagging that you untagged as well. So just putting those back up. Ecount says, which T20 league has the best scouting system? What are your favorite stories of teams unearthing talent seemingly out of nowhere? I think wasn't it early Rajasthan? I remember talking to Darren Berry about like them just going on the road and just watching people and like doing it. By now it's still a case, I think, too often that most of the players are they're already known, and so that they come across them. You get people, though, randomly come to nets. And this has happened with international cricketers, Ecount. That isn't an IPL or a T20 league thing. Sometimes you just have someone come to the nets and they bowl something and it's like, what the hell is that? So those stories still exist. And hopefully with T20 cricket, we'll hear more of them. Saurabh says, what sort of a discussion do England and Australian teams go through after they lose a series against India as compared to India losing in center? The problem with a question like this is, in the last decade, I think it would have been quite right for those teams to be like, well, they're the best team in the world in those conditions by a considerable distance. We'll have to get better next time. If you go back to 2016, 17, when Australia toured, they hired an Indian coach. They had a camp in Dubai. They were really committed to winning in India. That came from losing in India, right? So, yeah, teams still talk about that a lot. India's biggest series is Australia, and you usually overreact when you lose your biggest series, right? With Australia and England, it's probably marginally the Ashes, although India's pushing it at the moment. but it's still probably marginally the Ashes. I think that's pretty fair for every team. Ecount says, fans of which format have the longest attention spans? Which ones are the most focused? Your theories in extrapolate. I can't even speak at the moment. Of which format have the longest attention spans? Well, isn't that just Test cricket? I don't understand. I mean, it goes for the longest. Yeah. I mean, there are people who watch T20 cricket really, really closely, but generally that's because they're betting on it or it's fantasy. There's a couple of like just hardcore T20 nerds as well. Those have great attention spans. But there are plenty of Test fans with that as well. So I don't really know how to answer that perfectly. Soundcop says, I said it is unlikely for international players to go and play first-class cricket. Yes. How do you see the current debate around out-of-form cricketers go play first-class cricket compared to versus them fighting rest, family time, etc.? I think there are certain players that probably need to go and play first-class cricket because they need it. But I would be looking at what they did in their prime and how they handled their prime, right? And then go back to them and say, do you just think that there's a couple of things that you need to work on? Like Rohit might be like, I don't know what I would work on, right? And so at that stage, what is he doing back facing bowlers that aren't as good? Does he need a confidence boost? Probably not. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't really understand. First-class cricket is a really good predictor of how good you're going to be at international level. But it's not a finishing school, and it's a long way short of a finishing school. And going back to that level and facing worse bowlers in conditions that are quite often not like test matches, I don't know how that helps you. But there are certain people that do need to do that, right? That let's call them the Courtney Walsh type of people who just need to be grooved all the time by playing as much cricket as they can, and they feel comfortable with that. There are other cricketers who need the rest, right? Making everyone go and do the same thing doesn't make any sense. And there are so many cricketers around the world who do not play first-class cricket and still make lots of runs. And some of them include these Indian players. Shubham says, Abhishek Sharma and Tilak Varma S-tier talents. Tilak Varma I'm interested in on that. I would push him towards that. Abhishek Sharma I don't know because I think we just need to see how long he can... We've seen people come through and have 2 or 3 really good years of hitting, and then they don't match that after a while. I'd need to see Abhishek Sharma all around the world for him to be an S-tier talent, but Tilak Varma I would be more on that side of. Egan says, is Glenn Phillips a cricketer's cricketer? I could see Glenn Phillips playing club cricket, so that was someone's definition earlier today, wasn't it? Hassan says BCCI Super Petty with no host name in Champions Trophy jersey. Oh, I didn't see that. Are they not? I mean, that's just a bit ridiculous, isn't it? Just that's where the tournament's being played. They are the host, whether you agree with that country or not. But yeah, I haven't seen that, so I don't know anything about it. So I don't know if it's true or false, or if it's a rumor, or whatever. Aditya says, how much of an impact do you think the bat has for a batter to elevate his game? Sachin changed his bat in the final phase of his career. I think bats are like bras. And my wife has this theory that almost all bras are incorrect, right? And that even brass sales people, I don't know, bra sellers? I don't know what I don't know. All I know about bras is what my wife tells me and that episode of Seinfeld. But I think there's a lot of mistakes within bra sales, right? And there are a lot of women who wear the wrong bras all the way through their career, all the way through their peaks and their primes. But they wear wrong bras a lot. And then they wear the right bra and suddenly everything feels a lot better. And then later on, that's still not the right bra because their body has changed shape. I think bats are exactly the same. I think most batters use a bat that's wrong for them, but it feels good and they go with it. And then they make little changes all the way through. And then eventually they end up with, a bat that feels comfortable. But you change as an athlete. So I had a bat, we talked about it recently. I was given a Hawk bat by the, is it Gloucestershire? Where is Hawk from? But, they make professional bats. They've made them for international players before. Great bat manufacturers. The bat was a bit too heavy. And even though I was a bigger guy back then, I weighed a lot more, like 50 kilograms more. I still had trouble with the bat being heavy. Now I'm a lot fitter, especially strength-wise. upper body strength. I actually find that bat a lot more comfortable now, right? And the same with the Joker. Like when I picked up the Joker bat, like I was like, oh, I reckon if I picked that bat up 5 years earlier or 2 years earlier, I wouldn't have had the strength. So my body had changed. That's what I think about bats. Ben says, oh, yeah. Ben said, here's the question. The Bangladeshi board found Lou Vincent guilty in 2014, and just over 10 years later, the BPL has clear issues. So we're saying there are issues with anomalies, not with fixing, because we have to be very careful with this legally, Ben. What does change over those 10 years? Oh, I mean, the BPL's changed heaps over the 10 years. You know, the BCB has changed. The government of Bangladesh has changed. The ownership structure of the BPL has changed. So it's a completely different league now than it was before. It's not just the BPL. I think the BPL is the T20 league that has the biggest issue with anomalies of a major T20 league. It's certainly not the only league I've seen this with. And there's a lot of T10 leagues that I think have similar issues as well. I think we're getting to a point where sporting boards have worked out, and this is not a cricket thing. Why would we go out of our way to say that our own players are corrupt? I think the conversation needs to be moved beyond the boards or the leagues making their own decisions about themselves. I don't know what Varun just did then, but whichever one he had, he can wait for a second. Noel says, started reading your book. Amazing first 4 chapters. The book, the book is called Overthrowing Cricket's Empire. I forgot the name of my own book. I had to turn around. I'm assuming that's the book that Noel's reading. I've written lots of books. Just curious about why individual scores were set with respect to time and not number of balls. Yeah, so back in the old days, the minute when they were looking at stuff, they would say the batter went into bat. If you look at the old English scoreboards, scorebook, sorry, it says time entered the crease and time left. That isn't even the case for all cricket around the world. Like there are plenty of scorebooks I've seen in other countries that don't even have the time in, time out, or quite often it's not even filled in anymore, right? And so back in those days, that's how we decided if an innings was fast or slow. And they didn't even know, even though in England, the old scorebooks allowed you to put all the dots in, which isn't the case for every cricket scorebook around the world. But certainly the old England ones allowed for that. No one just went back and counted them afterwards because we already had another method for saying, well, he made an hour in 60. He made an hour. He made 100 in an hour, right? Leary Constantine. Like, it doesn't matter how many balls. He did it in an hour. That's incredible. And so, we've had to slowly go back to that other method. And it's really since the 1980s that batting balls have become a thing. And I think it's just because ODI cricket forced them in. No. So I think before that, we didn't really have a need to worry about that stuff. Kachua says, I wanted your opinion to settle debate amongst my friends. You are the most handsome. Hope that helps. Which of the following skills is it difficult to master across all 3 formats? Batting, bowling, or captaincy? In my opinion, it should be captaincy. I wonder if it's not bowling. Maybe it should be batting. I think captaincy's that hard. Yeah, I don't think captaincy's that hard. So I would probably go with batting or bowling. I think in the future, bowling will separate more than batting. Because I think there's going to be more specialist white ball bowlers. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's not much between it. Maybe the proper answer, KC, could be that, there is no spoon. That they're all as hard as each other. But I feel like it's bowling. I think the things that make you successful as a bowler in Test cricket do not make you successful as a bowler in T20 cricket. Whereas I think the things that make you successful as a batter in Test cricket do make you successful. So getting your head in the right position, getting your feet and your body in the right position works if you're batting in a Test match and you're blocking a ball, or if you're going to slog it to deep mid wicket. Whereas I think with bowling, being repeatable and hitting the top of off stump doesn't translate as much. right? Or being a spin bowler doesn't translate as much. So I'm going to go bowling, and I'm so confident with that. I'm not confident at all, am I? Last one from Jack. Jack says, relay catches are rare in tests. Do you remember any? I don't watch much cricket. I can recall only one catch from Stokes in the Ashes. You probably don't have two fielders out near the same boundary near each other as much in Test cricket, whereas you do in T20 and one-day cricket. The place where I've seen them a couple of times have probably been for hook shots, where you have two fielders out there. So I can think of a couple off the top of my head. But yeah, it's much rarer. And it's just because even when you have boundary riders in a Test match, they're usually probably spread out a lot more. Whereas, you know, if in T20 games on the leg side, or straight, right, which are probably the two that you're going to get the most, the fielders aren't that far from each other. So it makes more sense. That's me done. Thank you so much. So many super chats. Oh, nope, there's one more. Batman says, it's about time. Why don't ICC organize events like Rest of the World 11 versus England, India, pre-test a World Test Championship final can help England's touring teams and involve idle best players? It's probably down to scheduling as much as anything, but also it would be another thing that you'd have to give the ICC the ability to do. The last Rest of the World competition they did, a lot of the players didn't take it very seriously, and I think that was also another reason we haven't seen many since. I do think in the future we'll see some more, but yeah, I'm not sure we'll see too many more. Batman 9909. I'm Jarrod Kimber. This is the Wagon Wheel. Thank you very much for all your questions and your comments and everything else. Throw a like on the way out. Always helps us with the algorithm. And review us on your favorite podcasting platforms. What do I use? Is it Pocket? I don't know. Whatever I use on here. But yeah, wherever you do podcasts, if you can give us a review or some stars or all those sorts of things, all these things help. But I am Jarrod Kimber, and I'll see you again next time. It took God and the demon to build international cricket, but don't tell Johnny Bairstow. 1882, Australia had played one test in England against the god W.G. Grace, and they sucked. So they were playing him again, and it was a tough wicket. But England was in front, so Australia was desperate for a third innings lead. At number 8 was young all-rounder Sammy Jones. After a routine single, he walks down to do some gardening on the pitch. Grace whips off the bails and appeals. The ball wasn't dead, Jones was run out. The Australians were furious. In fact, some of the English players were also furious. But what Grace said went, and the umpires had already given it. Next in was Fred Spofforth. He was known as the Demon Fast Bowler. He was furious, and he let England know exactly what was coming next, which was maiden. There's 12 maidens. I can't count them all. England only needed 85 to win. W.G. Grace made 32. England only 77. That was the test where the Ashes began. Buy my book, Overthrowing Cricket's Empire, on Amazon today.